The home of the common Joe and the common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking. State of college football just keeps getting more confusing, especially when it comes to conference realignment and conference expansion each and every week. You get different stories, different scenarios. Sort of happened like this last year with Oklahoma and Texas when they defected to the SEC. Everybody thought everybody was going to start adding teams, and it was just going to be an apocalyptic type college football offseason. Same thing happened this year with two teams being added from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. Now everybody's in a fluster, and we don't know what direction college football is going in. Is it going to be like last year? Is it just going to be a bunch of hullabaloo about nothing, and things will just settle down, and we'll ride this out to 2024 and then have another massive expansion? Or will there be some moves made in the next few months? Let's talk about it. Well, here we are again, another episode of the OCF. The OCF, that's me, JPC, the outlaw of college football. In today's class, I want to talk about the state of college football and the expansion stuff that's been going around this whole offseason. I just want to come in here and just do a retrospect of what we've seen and what we could see. All we've seen so far in all this, you would have thought that we didn't have 3 or 4 different conference changes or something, but it's only been 2 teams thus far, that being USC and UCLA, but there's a lot of controversy even around those two. It doesn't seem to be a done deal. As I was reading a story today on Saturday Down South, and it's also on TrojansWire.com, that UCLA may have an issue with the California Board of Regents. As you know, UCLA is in the same system with the University of California at Berkeley, and they're not very happy about this. They're looking into litigation. I'm going to throw some graphs up here and there on here to let you guys know that there's an actual story out there about this. This ain't something I'm just throwing against a wall, so to speak. The California Board of Regents are looking into litigation to possibly seeing what their legal moves are and what they can do to possibly block UCLA from joining the Big Ten. Now, if that does happen, does the Big Ten just take USC at that point and go with an uneven number of, what would it be, 15 teams? And I know they've done that back in the day with Penn State when they added Penn State into the Big Ten in the 90s, but it's just not a very cohesive situation to have an odd number of teams. So a lot of people pointed out that if that does happen, one of my loyal listeners, Daniel Bitzer, who's a USC fan, pointed out if that does happen, a lot of people think that they'll just brush off UCLA and just go add Oregon or Washington to the mix. I don't know about that. The Big Ten has showed that they are not interested in Oregon and Washington. And if I was Oregon and Washington, I'd take that as an insult. I mean, considering UCLA is only good in basketball, really. I mean, they're periodically good in football. And then you have the Notre Dame equation. Everybody's talking about where's Notre Dame go, where are they going to go, what kind of legal litigation do they have? Do they have anything that can hold them back? And I didn't really think there was, because Notre Dame was an independent in football, but they are part-time in the ACC, so there would be a small payout on the other end of all the other sports. But there is also a caveat that's in that contract that I did not know about that says if Notre Dame does join another conference as a football member, well, at that point, they have to pay the full buyout because they're contractually obligated to join the ACC as a football member if they so choose and desire to join a conference as a football member. They're contractually obligated to join the ACC, therefore making the buyout exponentially larger, like closer to 100 million from what I'm seeing in this report here from 247 Sports. Now, as you look on down through here, here it is. NBC pays Notre Dame $15 million a year. The Big Ten pays each one of their conference members $57.2 million a year. The SEC, $54.3 million, and the ACC, if you're a full-time member, they will pay you $34.9 million per team. But if you're part-time, they pay you $10.8 million, which is what they paid Notre Dame. Now, they did pay Notre Dame $34.9 million for the one season they joined full-time as football. I didn't know that either. But it seems to me, unless there's some money that I'm missing here, outside of NBC and maybe some kind of sponsorships that I'm not aware of, it seems to me that now at this point the financial gains that Notre Dame could achieve by joining a conference now is much better than it was back in 2013 when they originally signed this contract with NBC. See, back in 2013 when they first signed it, it was more along the lines of what all the other conference teams were making in other conferences. Now, not so much. So all the Notre Dame fans that are using the excuse like, well, we can't join because we're making just way too much money with NBC, that might have been the case back in 2016 or 2017, maybe even 2018. But in the last 3 or 4 years, that is not the case. Notre Dame would benefit financially much more so in joining a conference. Even if it's the ACC, they would benefit greatly. So, where do we go for here? I mean, conferences, contrary to popular belief, conferences can't go out and actively seek teams. Well, they can, but if they do, there's something called tortious interference. And that's a big no-no. You get in a lot of trouble for that and lose a lot of money. So conferences don't go out and actively seek teams. And if they do, they better be really sneaky about it. Because if they don't, they're going to encounter a big-time lawsuit. So, with that being said, then you have the Big 12 and the Pac-12. These two conferences have been teetering the last 2 years. First, it was the Big 12 last year when they lost Oklahoma and Texas. Now, it's the Pac-12 losing USC and UCLA, and they're teetering. But there was something that was presented in these articles on Saturday Down South and 247 Sports that I really didn't think about either. The Pac-12, everybody's talking about the Big 12 adding 4 teams from the Pac-12. Well, what if the Pac-12 decides to bone up? What if Kliavkoff gets some kind of grand backing like he's saying he's going to do? He's making it out like he's going to get a grand contract of some sort from the media rights. And let's say Pac-12 gets a pretty good bit of money and they decide, you know what? We're going to go after some teams from the Big 12. Or they could go for some teams from the Mountain West. But other than San Diego State, I don't see of any other team out there would really be that beneficial to them. Unless they were to add Gonzaga in basketball. And I don't even know if that's really that beneficial. Well, who's to say maybe it would encourage Gonzaga to create a football team for that school. And Spokane's not a very small city. I mean, it's a mid-sized city, so it was the Big 12 rating the Pac-12, but now they're talking about the Pac-12 rating the Big 12. And that's what I'm talking about, man. This stuff's going back and forth, back and forth. What you're probably going to see is the most boringest thing of all. The Big 10 and the SEC are probably going to stand pat at 16 teams, at least until 2024 and 2025, is what I see. Now, the real war may be coming from the undercard conferences. I know they don't like being called that. They like to be called a Power 5, but they're losing some of that Power 5 status and swagger to me. The real war could be between the Pac-12 and the Big 12, and maybe even the ACC to some degree. If the ACC still wants to stay afloat, and they can come up with some kind of grand media rights thing to add to the pot to maybe keep Notre Dame in the mix, and they may get Notre Dame as a full-time football member. But that whole media rights deal and land grant of rights, or whatever the hell it's called, is keeping them cornered up, man. It's really shackling them. till 2036. But my question is, and maybe someone out there can help me with this, isn't ESPN in charge of all this? Are they not the entity that signed the ACC to all these contracts and all this 2036 crap? If so, if the ESPN wants to better their product and their big product and their horse that they're riding on is the SEC. If they want to make the SEC stronger, well, then they can just go and, I don't know if it'd be called tortoise interference with them, but they could just go and encourage some of the ACC schools to leave. And contrary also to popular belief, a lot of people think that it's an ironclad thing, there's no other way out, but there is. And I saw a listener of the program comment that the ACC would have to have 11 teams leave in order for that grant of rights to go away and disappear with no exit fee. And I thought it was more like half. Well, now that I looked into it, I was right. It's around half. It's 8 teams, not 11. I can't remember who made the comment, but I'm sorry to let you know that that's not correct. If the ACC can get 8 teams to leave that conference, well, then in 2024 and 2025, we could see all hell break loose. Kevin Warren, Greg Sankey need to get together and maybe discuss the possibility of divvying up the ACC. But there again, that may fall under the tortious interference laws. And if that's the case, then they can't talk to each other about it. But in the back room somewhere, a little wink wink, slip a node, do some Morse code, whatever you gotta do kind of shit to get this done, because it needs to be done. They need to just go to, I'm not saying just go to 2 mega conferences, but 3 maybe. Maybe the Big 12 and the Pac-12 merge. That would be something I wouldn't mind seeing. I don't want to see a complete monopoly of the Big 10 and the SEC. But the Big 10 and the SEC, if they took 4 teams each from the ACC, guess what that equals? Anyone in class? 8. That'd be 8 teams leaving. So people don't think about that. They're thinking like, oh, you got to get 8 teams. The SEC's not going to take 8. Big 10's not going to take 8. No, they're not. Take 4 apiece. Grant of rights goes away, and we can have that big playoff contract signed. Now, another thing that could force Notre Dame's hand is the whole college football playoff signing. In that contract that they're trying to get signed, it says and states that Notre Dame, while they would be eligible to get in the playoffs, they would not be eligible for a first-round bye or a game on campus in the first round if they were not a member of a conference. So that in itself could lend to Notre Dame finally deciding to join a conference. And everybody's talking about on the Notre Dame side, we're proud of our independence, but that's not really true, because y'all tried to join the Big Ten twice in the early part of the 20th century, in the 1930s and 1950s or 60s. Y'all tried to join. I think it was the 30s and the 60s. Y'all tried to join the Big Ten. And then fast forward to now, in the 1990s and in the earlier 2000s, the Big Ten came calling, and y'all turned them down twice. So it's been tick for tack. But that's all I got today on that. There's just so many scenarios that I didn't think about, that I just thought of, that I've been seeing these articles, like the Pac-12 possibly turning the tables on the Big 12 and them raiding the Big 12, which is not likely, but it is another scenario that's added to the mix. You guys and gals tell me what you think. Maybe y'all can think of some more scenarios in this whole conference realignment thing that has all of our heads spinning. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. If you don't mind, up underneath this video, there's a little heart thanks button. Hit that. Drop a few dollars in the coffers. Get us off this YouTube teat. And as always, KMCA to all the other teams.